Have you wanted to do WSJT-X digital modes like FT8 with your Yaesu FT-817 family radio? Well, here's how you can do it with a Digirig interface. Next on AA3K On The Go. Yaesu introduced the FT-817 in 2001 and sadly discontinued the family of radios in late 2022 after an amazing 21-year run. When Yaesu introduced this radio, it was an amazing package, small, lightweight, capable of HF, VHF, UHF, and 6-meter communications, and in all modes. And Yaesu wisely decided to include support for digital modes, which was one of the paradigm shifts of this radio, as those modes were typically only available in larger, less portable radios. Yaesu included support for packet, PSK31 at the time, RIDI, as well as some user-definable modes, because new modes were being introduced at a pretty regular rate, and even today they're still coming out with new digital modes, which are definitely making amateur radio even more exciting. If you've been wanting to connect your Yaesu FT-817 or 818 or any one of those radios in the family to a computer, particularly WSJT, to run FT8 or any other of the modes that WSJT-X supports, Digirig came out with this little interface which allows you to go from the computer, get the audio to the radio, and the audio back out of the radio to the computer. And on top of that, this little interface will also provide you with cat control for the radio. Hey, not bad for under $100. So I'm going to be going over how to set up the radio to use the Digirig interface and how to set up WSJT-X to at least do FT8. And I'll also give you a few tips on ordering this from Digirig's website. So stick around and we'll get right to it. Okay, let's look at how we have to set everything up to use the Digirig mobile interface. When you order one of these, you can order it in several different cat communications or rig control communication settings. The one that you would use for the Yaesu FT-8XX line of radios is the logic levels. They also sell a version that supports RS-232 and another version that supports ICOM's CIV methodology. All three of those Digirigs are the same hardware, they just internally configured a little bit through cuts and jumpers. This particular one is set up for logic level. It will work with the Yaesu FT-8XX line of radios, but if I wanted to use it with my ICOM 706 Mark II-G, I would have to go cut some jumpers as well as solder a couple of others to turn it into the CIV communications mode. Conversely, if I wanted to do the RS-232 communications, I would have to do some additional. So really and practically, once you have one of these, it should only be used with one particular radio. It is not easy to continuously convert it from one type of radio communications protocol to another. Along with purchasing the Digirig, you will need to purchase cables that will interface the Digirig to the radio and interface it for not only audio but serial communications for the radio control. Now, this particular hardware in this Digirig is version 1.8. Digirig is up to version 1.9 with a few enhancements within simplicities within the hardware design. One of the things they have done is they have color-coded one of these jacks, and the cables they sell now have a matching color code on the male plug here, so you always place it into the correct one quickly. To address that these tip ring sleeve connectors look the same on both cables, and you have to stare for the Yaesu FT-817 at the DIN connector on the other end, is I put a red dot next to the audio connector on my Digirig, and then I wrap some red tape around the particular cable. And on the back of my FT-817, I put a red dot on the data input, so I would know exactly which cable goes into this one, as these two DIN connectors are a little bit differently, and I don't recommend trying to jam one into the incorrect one, you'll probably break something. And with the FT-817 family out of production, it would be very hard to get it repaired. Additionally, you can order a long coiled USB-C to USB, I think that's type A, cable, or this shorter one with ferrite beads on it. Originally, I did order the longer coiled cable, but I found it was very susceptible to picking up RF when I was transmitting in digital modes, and which is a full duty cycle mode. So the FT-817 was basically going out in full 5-watt power, and that was causing problems, and the Digirig to drop connection to the computer, therefore requiring a complete reset of the thing. Going to the shorter cable with the ferrites has helped, but if I do have the antenna very, very close, I still find I get RF interference into the setup here. I'm not exactly sure where it's coming in, but it does jam up the communications. So giving yourself a few extra feet of separation between your antenna and your actual computer, the Digirig and the FT-817, does solve the problem very easily. So connecting everything up is really simple in my case here. And if you have the colored plugs, which happens to be a light green, the red cable goes into this connection, which is the audio on the on the Digirig. And then on the cable here, I always try to look for this top center detent, and that goes into the top center here, which is a little bit hard to see to do when we're looking through the camera. You'll feel it when it lines up. There we go, and just plug it right in there. Conversely, the other cable, which in this case is for the serial interface, that goes into the other jack. Find the center top detent, plug that into the other. Got that the first time. And the Digirig is connected to my FT-817. Put that down. Plug the USB-C in. This is harder to do through it watching on a camera than you would imagine. And in this case, I'm going to be demonstrating with my $60 Jenkopotamus here, and plug that into the USB port on the computer. Now, when I'm plugging this in, and when I'm plugging my 7300 into my other laptop, I always try to use the same USB port. So in particular, the COM port for the interface will come up the same. Now I just need to power up the FT-817 and show you how it needs to be configured. Okay, with power connected to the radio, and I have my 1-to-1 mag loop also connected to the radio for an antenna. Let's turn it on. Whoop. There. Okay, once we have the radio powered on, you can see it's in digital mode already, and on the 40 meter FT8 frequency, I have this radio configured for user-defined digital mode. So in that case, to configure those things, and since FT8 is the only digital mode I run with this radio, I can just leave it in that setting all the time. If you're going to be going back and forth between packet, RIDI, any other digital modes, and you need to make changes in the configuration, it's probably good to write these things down so you can return them to the setting that you want for that particular digital mode. Hold the 817's, 818's F button in for about a second, and you'll get into the deep menu system. And the first setting that we want to check for FT8 is the digital display, and this will be an offset on the display from the frequency that you set. And I have mine set to 0 Hertz, which has been working just fine for me. Next one is the digital mic level, which is basically how much mic gain the radio will apply to the digital signal coming in, and I've left it at the default of 50, and everything has been working fine. And you can make adjustments in the FT8 WSJT and how much drive energy that you're going to be sending to the radio in the form of the volume output. Next setting is digital mode, and here, since FT8 runs in upper sideband, I have it set to user U, which is for upper sideband. You can also select lower sideband if you want to do PSK31 in upper sideband, which could work for FT8 also. You can set it for RIDI mode also, but I'm just going to leave it in user upper sideband. And digital shift, if you want an offset between the frequency you've programmed in and what is actually transmitted, you can set it here, but I also have just left it set at 0 Hertz. And that is it. Once you have those settings, and if you're not going to make any other changes, you can just leave them as is. Hold in the F key for another half a second or a second or so to store that into the FT-817's memory, and you will be good to go. And the one thing I really don't like about the 817 and its family is the lack of drag on the volume. I'm sorry, the lack of drag on the VFO. Just a little tap and you've moved it, tens or hundreds of hertz off the frequency where you want it. As one person explained it, lock is your friend for that. Another person did suggest pulling this rubber off, loosening the set screw, and taking the VFO knob off and putting a felt disc in back of the VFO knob and putting it back just to add some drag, so a little bump won't change your frequency here. Since we're going to be running, or since we're going to be controlling the 817 through its computer-aided transceiver interface, the CAT control, then we can do everything else from within WSJT-X. Okay, let's take a look at WSJT-X. I've got screen capture set up, and I'll show you how to configure it, and we'll just show some receiving. The room that I'm filming this in has foil-backed insulation in its walls, so it turns this room into a pretty good Faraday cage or shield room, so getting RF out isn't very effective, and the mag loop does work as an antenna, but it is not the greatest antenna that I have used. Here we are at my $60 Jenkopotamus laptop. That is what I typically use with my Yaesu FT-817. The first thing you want to do after you plug in the Digirig into the computer is open up Device Manager. And this is a Windows PC here. You do something similar on a Macintosh. You need to find out where the COM port is for the Digirig. And opening up these ports, COM and LPT, you'll see it is COM4 here, and it is a Silicon Lab CP210X USB to UART bridge. If your computer comes up with a warning triangle here that it's not properly identified the USB serial interface device within the Digirig, you can go to Silicon Lab's website and download the driver, and I will have a link to that download in the description of this video. In particular, you just have to remember that it's COM4. I always try to plug the device into the same port that I use it, so the COM ports don't jump around. Every now and then I find they do. I have never really researched the reason for that. And if you find yourself in that situation through Device Manager, at least you can go to View, Show Hidden Devices, and in this case you'll show devices that have reserved COM ports but are not currently in use. In this case, you can see I've used the computer with an ICOM 705 at one point. It's remembering those COM ports there. And here is the USB serial port that I've used it with my True SDX. So if you don't want one of those COM ports, if you know if it's saying it's another CP210X at a different COM port number, you can just right click on them and go to uninstall device, and it will remove that particular COM port instantiation. In this case, I'm going to be working with the True SDX in this computer, so I'm going to be leaving that, and I may go back again and work with the ICOM 705, so I'm going to be leaving them. In terms of audio, which is the second biggest thing about the Digirig interface, you can open up here and you'll see it says microphone to USB PNP plug-and-play sound device and speakers to USB PNP sound device. Again, if you unplug the USB, those will disappear and then come back. and they are the audio interface that's part of the Digirig. So once you have that information, in this case COM4 and microphone and speakers 2, we're all set to configure WSJT-X. And here we go. Let's fire it up. And I have not yet played with the new WSJT-X Improve, but some of the new features in that program look very interesting. So I do intend to try it out before long and look for a overview and review of it some point in the future here on AA through K on the Go. Okay, once the splash screen gets away. Now, I've already pre-configured WSJT-X to work with the 817 here in the Digirig. But you go to File Settings, and if you've never configured WSJT-X, initially you set your call sign here. You'll set where your grid square is. I leave that as all. Full call in TX3 for calling CQ. I should say for message generation. And I keep the following features enabled here: blank line between decoding periods, display distance in miles, transmit messages in the receive frequency window. So when it's transmitting, say, CQ or any of your exchanges for FT8, they'll appear on your receive side for the refrequency. And also double clicking on a call sign in the list will go straight into transmit enable and disable the transmitter after sending 73. And the rest of the settings here are pretty much default. Going over to the radio tab here, as you can see, I've set the Yaesu FT-817 for my radio. There is a separate setting in this drop down for many radios, but there is a separate setting for the 818 as it has a slightly different control syntax as compared to the 817. COM4, as we looked up previously. In my case, I have the radio set to 38,400 baud. And again, long press of the F, I forget which menu it is, but there is a menu for setting the baud rate, and you can set the baud rate there. I think the Yaesu's defaulted to 9600, but for commonality with another radio, I moved it up to 38.4. For data bits, I leave it set at default, as well as the stop bits. But you could change it to 7 or 8 data bits, 1 or 2 stop bits. But each radio has its preferred communications protocol, and just let the definition take care of it. And the handshake back and forth between the radio saying it's ready to accept data and the radio is transmitting data, don't try to send me anything. Again, just leave that as the default mode. How I want to control push to talk on the radio, I'll just do it through the cat command. That in this case, the computer will send a command to the radio telling it to go into transmit. For mode, I say data packet, which will shift the radio into digital mode automatically. And for split operation, I say fake it. And as you can see, there's a tooltip that pops out if you hover over it. Finally, with all that set, you can hit test cat. And if all is good and WSJT-X has been able to successfully communicate with the radio, it will go highlight that as green. And if you hit test PTT, I can see on the radio the transmit light is lit, and therefore we're in complete control of the radio. Next tab you need to make settings on is the audio tab. And here we go, what we want is our input, is what we noted from Device Manager before. Microphone 2, USB plug and play sound device, which you can go in through Windows and change the name of that to say Digirig microphone or something like that. Similarly with the Digirig output to speakers. Unfortunately with Windows 10, and I think Windows 11 is the same, I don't like how they've set that up. I find it much more confusing than the previous versions of Windows. We had better, more granular control over those items. So I just leave those as is. Leave the setting here as mono, and the rest of the items as they default to. And then you're good to go. As you can see, I'm already pulling in FT8 data here, and there's a couple of stations calling CQ. If I double click on one, you can see I'm now going into calling CQ for that station. and I'm telling it, calling his station ID, my call sign, and my grid square. And if you've watched some of my other videos, in particular hamming from a hotel room, I've demonstrated FT8 working there, so with the same setup. With the loop antenna and the fact that I'm in this almost shield room, that he's not going to hear me. So I'm just going to see if he go through this receive cycle and see if I get anything back. And nothing. Okay, now there you have it. FT8 on a Yaesu FT-817. The same procedure will work with the ND variation of the radio as well as the 818 and the 818 ND. The very nice thing about the Digirig interface, it lets you very easily add sound card capabilities to older radios that lack them. Just a couple more things for setting up WSJT-X along with your FT-817, 818. The first thing is make sure you turn off the narrow filter if you have one installed within your radio. I have a 500 Hz CW filter in my Yaesu FT-817, and when you go to digital modes, it does not automatically turn that off. So I have wondered sometimes why I am not seeing very many FT8 stations on the bands, when the band should be pretty much wall-to-wall FT8 stations, and that's why. I'm just listening to barely 500 Hertz. And the next thing you want to do is set the audio level drive to the radio so you don't drive the radio too hard and distort the signal, cause spurs, emissions, and harmonics within an intermodulation within the FT8 signal. So on your FT-817, set the meter to the power output indication, come here to the power slider on WSJT-X and reduce it all the way to the bottom of the scale. Now I don't want to change this setup because this is being filmed here on my home station. And then slowly increase it while you're transmitting, and watch the power output meter on the FT-817, 818, and when it just hits full scale, stop. And you may want to back it off just a tiny bit from that point, and then you will be properly set. Now I've only done this with my radio at 5 watts, but if you'd like to run the 817 or the 818 at lower power, that should work. The nice thing about the Digirig interface is that through the variety of cables that they have available, it can be interfaced to quite a few other radios that do not have a direct built-in sound card. They have cables specifically for the Lab 599, for ICOM, in particular the 706 Mark IIG, as well as the rest of the 706 family. And I just noticed they do have cables available for the true SDX, but I have not tried them out yet. Digirig has to be commended for their support of the amateur radio community. Their Digirigs can also be used to connect to HTs, and not only for doing digital communications through those HTs, but also for programming the HTs, say through Chirp. If you have any additional comments or questions, go ahead and put them in the comments section down below, and me or somebody else that's watching this channel will be able to get back to you and give you some guidance on or direction to an answer. Hey, I'd like to thank you for watching. This is Mark AA3K 73, and remember, I'm trying to help you make the outdoors your ham shack.